Putin meets Iran and North Korea, I mean, the leaders of this country. And everyone is like, the world shudders. The world is afraid. Is the world afraid? Do you think? Do you feel that?
I don't sense that, no. It seems rather ridiculous, yeah. I think the whole charade with Kim Jong-un coming on his magic armored train,
yeah,
because he's afraid of invisible assassins, just like his father and his grandfather before him. The whole thing was rather circus-like. And I think it's deeply humiliating for Putin. I think he feels that he has no friends other than these to call on, the pariahs of the world, the ones that are under as strict or stricter sanctions than him. This was not the way Putin, I think, envisioned his reign when it started. He envisioned himself, and in many ways achieved, a seat at the table with global leaders. And now he's indicted by the International Criminal Court. I'm sorry, it's hard to imagine a greater level of isolation. So I think that hurts him deeply, and I think the world does not look at that and say, my goodness, there's some kind of great axis of evil forming, because they look rather pathetic.
So this is like from piranha to pariah. That's a long way. What's next? But there are too many pariahs in one place. I mean, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Maybe they have a plan. Maybe he's deeply hurt. He hurted his own feelings because he started the war in Ukraine. But what's next? What do you feel again? I mean,
the question is China. The answer to that question. I think the countries that Russia currently can call allies, right? Belarus, Iran to an extent, but not as solid as I think Putin would like. North Korea. This is not a kind of earth-shattering coalition. But if China decides to give more support to Russia, I think there we see the formation of something that's really alarming and concerning. But we don't see that yet. At least I don't see signs of that. I'm not a China expert. I'm not a geopolitical expert. My focus throughout my career has very much been on Ukraine and Russia and this region, to an extent Germany and Eastern Europe more broadly. But I think the sense is very clear among international political experts that if China gets more involved and agrees to support Putin and his regime more actively, that's a big shift. We don't see that yet. And from what I can see of China's behavior, I don't think they're leaning in that direction.
What if they will? The United States, what is the reaction? Well, it probably could be the reaction, but there should be a reaction.
I think there should already be a reaction. I would like to think, as an American citizen, that my government is gaming out some response to that diplomatically and otherwise. I don't know. Again, it's really not my area of expertise, but I think at that point, we would seriously be talking about some kind of major Cold War, if not a third world war on the horizon.
Okay, I will ask this question later on, but this is a very important question. Now, NATO is preparing to hold its largest joint command exercise since the Cold War in the spring 2024, as per Financial Times. More than 40,000 military personnel will practice in repelling staged Russian aggression against one of the allies members. Do you feel the world is on the verge of a new world war?
I certainly hope not, but I think it would be irresponsible for the Western allies to not prepare for a larger expansion of the war in Ukraine. President Zelensky has warned repeatedly. I think he hasn't been heard as much, but he has warned in his speeches that if Ukraine does not get the support it needs to win, to stop Russia in Ukraine, then we are looking at a wider war, because Russia will continue on, and its next attack could very well be against a NATO ally. And then we are talking about a World War III scenario. That's certainly something that President Biden and a lot of the allies, Chancellor Scholz in Germany, have been really desperate to avoid even moving in that direction. But I think if they do not support Ukraine, if they don't give Ukraine the support it needs to prevent that kind of scenario where Russia's aggression is allowed to kind of spill ever further to the west, into other regions, other countries, then yeah, that's the risk.
Well, I mean, the United States is spending like $850 billion in military expenses every year. And now the United States spends like 3 or maybe 4% to help Ukraine. So if the United States and allies and Germany would really want this war to be over, it will be over. Do you think this is the case?
I think so. I think the more time passes, the less obvious that is to me. I think certainly earlier in the invasion, last year, at any point, a few months ago, if the support was equal to the capacity of the West to help, right, then yes, I think Ukraine would be able to win this war. We can talk separately about what that means, what that looks like, but regain all of its territory. I think there's certainly a lot of people in the leadership in Ukraine who see victory more as the weakening of Russia to the point at which it can no longer attack again. That's another definition of victory, but we can talk about that separately. I think the West, certainly has the capacity to help. I think to some extent the price tag, you named this figure as a proportion of GDP. That's one way to look at it. I think the price tag is getting high enough that a lot of people are starting to ask the question of how much more. One thing that comes up in this context, in my mind, always is what about this $300 billion war chest that is frozen in American and Western banks, the Russian reserves? We heard about that in the first days and weeks of the invasion, right? And then it kind of fell off of the agenda a little bit. Now and then we hear some talk about, why there are bureaucratic hurdles, red tape, legal lines that are difficult to cross, precedents that the West doesn't want to set in seizing these reserves. But excuse me, one question that comes up is, okay, if you don't want to spend taxpayer money to help Ukraine, what about that war chest?
But why not to spend some taxpayers' money on that? I mean, this is about the human values, or the West collective West keeps on telling everyone and itself that it is all about the human values. But human values is a universal thing. It should be working all across the human universe. And it doesn't work only in Oklahoma or New York or Kiev. It should be working everywhere. And if wants to spend like even 10% of just the military budget, I'm not talking about the GDP of the United States, of course. Let's spend 5%. The war will be over already, and that's it. So maybe the whole world is just not ready for that.
I think what you touch on there is the information war to an extent.
Absolutely.
This is very much the framework in which President Zelensky has been looking at the war since the very beginning. He's wanted to convince the world that this is not just some territorial dispute at the edges of Europe. This is a war that touches the interests of everyone around the world. And he's tried consistently to explain that. It's difficult. It's a difficult job. I think his partners and allies in the West haven't quite found the way to express that to their own citizens, their own electorate, in a way that convinces people around the world that, yes, we need to help Ukraine, not just because it's the morally right thing to do, but because it's our own national self-interest, right? I think that's the difference, the line in the information war that President Zelensky and many of his allies have tried to cross in convincing people of the kind of national self-interest here. But if you look at the messaging coming from the leadership in Kyiv, that's what they're trying to argue. I think their arguments are quite sound, certainly as regards many European countries, all European countries, members of NATO, but in many ways also the global South. If you look at food supplies, right, the kind of threat and the damage that this war has done to export routes out of Ukraine for grain, this affects many regions around the world, Africa, the Middle East, I mean, you name it. So I think that is an important message for President Zelensky and his allies to get across. I don't think they've quite gotten there yet. This matters to everyone. This is not just a charity case. This is the self-interest of the nations who are providing the aid.